Andrew Whitmore blinked, just once, as if the world around him had fractured in that split second. The kind of blink that doesn't just shut your eyes, it shuts reality out. He stood tall in that polished mahogany courtroom like he owned time itself, the kind of man who never bowed, never broke, and certainly never stood for anyone he didn't already control. Cameras rolled silently. The wood-paneled walls swallowed the hum of tension. Reporters leaned forward without blinking. But when Judge Aaliyah Monroe entered the room, every molecule in that space seemed to freeze. She didn't announce herself. She didn't need to. Her presence slid in like winter air under an old door, sharp, undeniable, something you feel in your teeth before your mind can name it. And Andrew, he refused to rise, not out of principle, out of something colder, darker, something even he couldn't quite name. That's when she smiled, not the kind of smile that softens a room, but the kind that quietly sharpens it, and whispered something. No one heard it. No mic caught it. No lip reader could decipher it. But Andrew's body responded before his mind could catch up. His eyes widened, not with fear but with recognition. He began to tremble. And that's when the feed cut out. You're watching something no one else saw. Something scrubbed from every court archive within hours. It aired for 12 seconds on a local affiliate channel before being pulled. If you blinked, you missed it. But the damage was already done. A billionaire shook on live TV, on her word alone. And a minute later, he was gone. Vanished. No one saw him leave the building. No SUV pulled up. His security detail didn't report anything unusual. The cameras outside the courthouse caught nothing. His phone pinged twice from inside the building and then went dead. Not powered off. Dead, as if every last trace of his signal had been devoured by something that didn't understand time the way we do. This isn't about race. It's not about power. It's about what happens when someone finally asks the question that unravels everything we think we know about justice. What if the law remembers you? Not the courtroom, not the judge. The law itself, like something ancient, buried under centuries of dust and denial. What if there are verdicts that can't be reversed, because they were never written down? What if guilt leaves a scent only some people can smell? There's a story Judge Monroe tells in private, only to those who've seen things they can't explain, about a man years ago who refused to acknowledge a ruling, not because it was unjust, but because it was spoken by a voice he thought he'd buried in his childhood. That voice? It belonged to his grandmother, dead since 1981, never recorded, never known to anyone in the legal world. And yet, when the court stenographer played back the audio from that day, her voice, aged, cracked, unmistakable, delivered the sentence. That file was destroyed, or at least it was supposed to be. I've heard it. Once, and I'll never forget the last thing it said. There's more. 1 week before Andrew vanished, his newborn niece, barely 6 weeks old, was heard on the baby monitor saying a name no one in the family had spoken aloud since the 80s. Monroe. Just that. Once, clear as a whisper through glass. They thought it was a trick of the static, until the judge's name appeared on the court docket the next day. You think this is coincidence. But tell me, when's the last time a man with everything lost control of his own legs? When's the last time a child spoke a name tied to a legacy she couldn't possibly know? When's the last time a courtroom fell silent before the gavel struck? You still think this is about justice? Then tell me why the last person who tried to subpoena that courtroom's security footage called their lawyer to withdraw the case, only to vanish 3 hours later without packing a bag, cashing a check, or canceling a single subscription. Tell me why no one, not one person, has stood when Judge Monroe entered a room since. And tell me why, as of this morning, Andrew Whitmore's mansion has power, heat, and fresh groceries delivered, but no one has seen him inside for 31 days straight, because I've seen what's coming next. And you're not going to believe who just received a summons. The summons arrived like a whisper slipped beneath a locked door, barely noticeable until it was too late to ignore. Andrew Whitmore's name was etched across the page in sharp black ink, official and cold, calling him back to a place he no longer seemed to belong. But if you think this means Andrew's story picks up where it left off, think again, because that's the first lie you have to let go of. What followed didn't unfold like a headline, didn't unravel like the neat, satisfying end to a thriller. It twisted instead, slow, subtle, like fog creeping in through cracks you never noticed were there. When I tried to trace what happened next, the trail grew faint, fainter than any ordinary disappearance should allow. The courthouse cameras that once captured the trembling billionaire, the whispered name of Judge Monroe, the vanished lawyer, all the evidence I thought I held slipped through my fingers like smoke. Footage was erased. Reports were rewritten. People I spoke to remembered events differently or claimed they never happened at all. One woman, a clerk present that day, laughed nervously when I mentioned Andrew's refusal to stand. "That never happened," she said. "Maybe you dreamed it." Her eyes darted away like she expected the room to swallow her whole. And that's when the questions started. Am I losing grip on the story, or did something bigger come to erase it? The line between what's real and what isn't began to blur, thread by thread, until I wasn't sure if the images I saw were memories or hallucinations. I began to hear things, audio glitches in recordings, whispers in the static when no one spoke. On one old interview tape with Andrew, his voice warped, twisting into something unrecognizable for just a fraction of a second. A breathy sound that wasn't his. Something urgent, like a warning. I slowed it down, repeated it. The words never fully came clear, but the feeling stuck, cold and jagged. Then there were the gaps, moments in my own memory of the events I couldn't explain. Times when the story didn't make sense. When a conversation I was sure I had suddenly evaporated from my mind as if protected by some unseen hand. Was I being watched? Was my own sense of time and place being manipulated? And who would want to do that? More importantly, why? Enter Claire Bennett. Claire claims she was Andrew's closest confidant, the one person who stood beside him in those last days before everything fell apart. She showed up at my door on a rainy night, soaked and trembling, eyes wild but wary, like she was running from something only she could see. She told me the story I'd been chasing was only half the truth, that the billionaire's disappearance was tied to something ancient, something the system tried to bury beneath layers of law and lies. But Claire's story fractured as quickly as it took shape. Her voice would falter, sentences trailing off into silence. She spoke of shadowy figures, conspiracies threaded through the city's veins, yet couldn't provide a single name or solid lead. She claimed to have recordings, proof that the world wasn't as it seemed, files stored on a drive she refused to let me see. "It's safer this way," she whispered, eyes flicking toward the darkened window as if the night outside was listening. The more I pressed, the more her narrative unraveled into contradictions, memories that didn't line up, dates that shifted. Was she protecting me, or was she unraveling under her own haunted past? Her presence was like a storm trapped in a teacup, intense, unpredictable, and leaving behind an unsettled chill that I couldn't shake. At times, I caught her staring off into nothing, lips moving silently as if rehearsing words that would never come. Once she confessed she'd heard voices, not just in the courtroom but at home, late at night, voices that promised to tell her the truth if only she could listen long enough. She refused to say more, eyes shut tight like holding back a scream. The nights grew longer and colder. I found myself double-checking my own notes, wondering if the story I'd thought I uncovered was just the fever dream of someone unraveling under the weight of secrets too heavy to bear. Audio files I reviewed on my own computer began to glitch and distort randomly, conversations cutting out mid-sentence, static filling the silence like a secret trying to scream through the noise. Even my phone started acting strangely. Calls dropped, texts vanished, images blurred as if my devices themselves were complicit in hiding the truth. The strangest moment came one evening when I found a recording tucked away in a folder I was certain I hadn't created. It was a minute long, just static and muffled breathing, but at the very end a voice, a woman's voice, low and urgent, cut through. "They don't want you to remember." The file had no metadata, no source, and the name attached was one I couldn't place. When I asked Claire, she looked at me like I'd asked her to explain the impossible. Maybe this is what they mean by losing your grip on reality. When the lines between paranoia and prophecy are so thin, you can't tell if the shadows creeping at the edge of your vision are ghosts or your own mind betraying you. What if the real unsolved mystery isn't Andrew's disappearance or the courtroom incident, but the truth behind what no one tells you? How easily reality fractures when the stories you depend on start slipping through your fingers. How quickly your sense of self can shatter under the weight of something invisible. One night, after hours spent piecing together fragments that refused to form a whole, I asked Claire the question that had been clawing at me. Are you sure any of this is real? Or have we been chasing a ghost? She looked at me then, face eye, pale in the flicker of my laptop screen, and said something I'll never forget. Reality, she said quietly, is just the story we tell ourselves when the truth is too terrifying to face. And with that, she vanished. No goodbyes, no explanation. Just gone. The only trace left behind was the faint echo of her voice on my voicemail, a single message I dared not play back for fear of what I might hear, or what it might make me forget. Now, sitting here with this threadbare story unraveling around me, I'm left with nothing but the silence of unanswered questions. Was Andrews shaking the moment a crack in the fabric of something older and darker? Is Judge Monroe more than a person, a force of reckoning that no one can stand against? Or am I, and maybe you watching this, caught in a web spun by memories, too fragile to trust? The truth is hiding in the spaces between what's said and what's remembered, between what they want you to see and what they desperately hope you forget. And somewhere, just beyond the edge of this story, something is waiting to pull us all under. Because sometimes the real mystery isn't what disappeared, but what refuses to be found. I thought I had it. The pieces, the fragments, the whispers, they were all falling into place like a long-lost puzzle finally revealed under the harsh light of day. After weeks of chasing shadows and wrestling with my own doubts, I found what I believed was the key. An old file buried deep in the court archives, one that had somehow escaped erasure, misfiled or overlooked by those desperate to keep the truth, locked away. The document was thin, yellowed at the edges, but its contents were explosive. An internal memo from a judge decades ago, a warning about something unseen in the justice system, a hidden force corrupting verdicts, influencing the balance of power in ways no one dared admit. The memo named names. Officials who vanished. Cases reversed on no evidence. Whispered conversations about the Watchers. This was it. The hidden truth. The real conspiracy behind Andrew Whitmore's trembling refusal. The vanished lawyer. Even the baby who spoke a name that never should have been uttered. I was on the verge of exposing everything. I spent nights cross-referencing every detail. I tracked down the judge who had written the memo, a frail old man named Charles Wentworth, living in a nursing home on the outskirts of Chicago. He was reluctant at first, his eyes clouded with age and suspicion. But something about the urgency in my voice cracked the decades of silence. He told me a story I still struggle to put into words, a story that felt like slipping back into a half-remembered dream, fragments that didn't quite fit, memories that felt more like warnings than history. He spoke of a case in the 1980s, eerily similar to what I had just witnessed. A young man, wealthy and influential, refused to stand in court before a black judge. The courtroom had fallen silent in disbelief, the man's defiance shaking the foundations of the justice system. But that was only the surface. The real horror, Wentworth said, was what happened afterward. The man disappeared, his mansion left untouched but empty, his existence erased from records. The judge who presided over that case, a woman much like Aaliyah Monroe, was rumored to have a connection to something older, a force that judges the judges, unseen and relentless. Listening to him, I felt a strange kinship to those fragmented memories, like I was reconnecting with a part of myself I'd long forgotten. Something flickered in my mind, a glitch, a hesitation in my recollections that made me pause. The details of my own past, the childhood I thought I remembered clearly, began to warp and twist, the edges blurring into something I couldn't quite grasp. Faces I thought were strangers suddenly seemed familiar. Places I'd never visited felt etched in my bones. A memory surfaced. A voice, soft but insistent, calling my name when I was too young to understand. A fleeting glimpse of a shadow watching me from the hallway, vanishing the moment I turned. I tried to dismiss it as a trick of my mind, a memory glitch born from exhaustion and obsession. But Wentworth's warning hung in the air. You're not crazy, they lied to you. They don't want you to remember because some truths are too dangerous. He looked at me then, his eyes narrowing, haunted, and whispered, "They're still watching. Always watching." That night, as I lay awake, the room around me seemed to pulse with a presence just beyond perception. A weight pressing down, a silence so thick it swallowed every sound. The shadows in the corners deepened, and the air tasted cold, metallic, like the edge of something breaking through. I felt eyes on me, countless and unseen, tracing my every move, waiting for a crack, a slip. Then came the call. The voice on the other end was distorted, layered with static and urgency. "You're close," it hissed. "But you don't know what you're dealing with. Stop digging or it'll take everything you've ever known." I hung up, heart pounding, but the warning only fueled my obsession. The deeper I went, the more the boundaries between past and present, truth and illusion began to dissolve. The file, the judge, the vanished billionaire. They were threads in a tapestry far darker and more intricate than I'd ever imagined. And then I found it. The single detail that shattered the fragile sense of resolution I'd built. In Wentworth's memo buried in the fine print was a name I knew too well. My own. Not just my name, but a date, a case, a connection I never saw coming. Somehow, impossibly, I was woven into this mystery from the start, not as an observer, but as a part of the story, an echo of a trauma I couldn't fully remember, a silence I'd been carrying without knowing why. I rewound everything. The courtroom footage, Claire's fractured tales, the whispers, the glitches, the vanished people. I realized then that every moment I thought I was uncovering truth was only a deeper layer of the lie. The story wasn't about Andrew Whitmore. It wasn't even about Judge Monroe or the vanished lawyer. It was about me. About the shadows that have been lurking in my own past, waiting to resurface, waiting to claim me. This isn't just a real unsolved mystery. It's a reflection of the truths no one dares speak aloud, the ones buried so deep inside us that we don't recognize them as our own memories anymore. The moments of doubt, the things they don't want you to remember, the feeling that reality itself is slipping away. I thought I had answers. Now I'm not sure I have anything but questions. And the thing that's been watching all along, it's closer than I ever feared, closer than anyone should be. Watch it again. Watch everything. From the beginning, because nothing is what it seemed, and the hidden truth it's still waiting for all of us to remember. I never realized I was not alone until the messages began. Subtle at first, barely there, like a whisper carried on the edge of static in a radio signal. A flicker in a grainy video, a sudden glitch in an old recording, a symbol flashed for just a fraction of a second on a news broadcast. A twisted spiral, half hidden behind a blurred headline, a shape both familiar and alien, something buried deep in the collective unconscious, but never spoken aloud. It was as if someone, or something, had cracked open the screen between my world and another, beckoning me to listen more closely, to watch more carefully. And then the dreams began. Not my dreams alone, but dreams shared. Fragments of vision, bleeding across unknown minds, stitched together by faces I did not know but felt I should. I wasn't the only one haunted by that courtroom's silence, that vanished billionaire, that whispered name that refused to stay buried. Across cities, states, even decades, others woke with the same cold dread pressing into their chest, the same memory glitches that distorted reality until it was no longer clear who they really were or how much control they had over their own thoughts. And like me, they found symbols, the same spiral carved into bark, drawn in dust on forgotten floors, scribbled in margins of discarded notebooks. You were right all along, these symbols seemed to say. But right about what exactly? That the story was bigger than just Andrew Whitmore, bigger than any one courtroom drama or vanishing act? That beneath the thin veneer of our daily lives, something was pulling the strings of identity, memory, and control, weaving a web so vast and insidious it swallowed whole the lines between self and other, past and present, truth and illusion. Found one of them, or perhaps it found me, a figure shrouded in half-truths and deeper secrets, someone who claimed to be watching from the shadows since the beginning. They called themselves the Observer, and unlike anyone I'd met, their eyes held no uncertainty, only an unsettling calm born of knowing too much and sharing too little. They spoke in fragments, never full sentences, as if every word was a carefully measured offering, a code meant to be pieced together by those willing to listen beyond the surface. Found footage from 20 years ago, the Observer whispered, in a message left on a cracked phone I'd never answered until that night. Shows the first sign, what the government never released because it didn't want you to see. You think this is new? It's ancient. It's us. And us is never just one. Through the Observer's cryptic guidance, I uncovered a network, ghostly, invisible, operating beneath the cracks of everyday reality. People who shared the same fragmented memories, the same haunting fears, linked by dreams they couldn't explain, and symbols they didn't understand but recognized as warnings. Their messages weren't just texts or emails, but puzzles encoded in forgotten languages, hidden in art, buried in archives only accessible through persistence and intuition. Each message was a thread in a tapestry woven from fear and defiance, a silent resistance to a force that had quietly, patiently erased their histories and rewritten their identities. The more I learned, the less I understood who I was. Every revelation pulled back another layer, revealing versions of myself I hadn't known existed, memories that didn't belong to me, feelings that felt planted like seeds in barren soil. Was I the hunter or the hunted, the observer or the observed? The distinction began to dissolve into nothingness, swallowed by a creeping sense of disconnection so profound it left me questioning the very nature of consciousness. What if the self was just another story told to keep us tethered, a lie whispered so persistently that we forgot to question its roots? In the deepest moments of that unraveling, I found myself staring at a mirror that didn't reflect my face, but a shifting mosaic of strangers, shadows merging and separating in endless cycles. The Observer's words echoed. Control is an illusion you are allowed to believe. Memory is a thread they tug to keep you in line. But sometimes, the thread snaps. And then, just as I began to grasp the magnitude of the force watching us all, silent, patient, unrelenting, I felt it. A presence so close it seemed to breathe against my skin, so intimate that it knew my fears before I spoke them, knew my doubts before they formed. It wasn't outside me or inside me. It was both and neither, a boundary dissolved. The spiral, the symbols, the vanished people, they were signs of its reach, proof that the story wasn't just unfolding around me, but within me. The network, the observer, the fractured memories, all pieces of a greater design I could not yet name. And yet the pull to keep digging, to keep watching was irresistible, a hunger that defied logic and reason. Because somewhere in that labyrinth of whispers and forgotten truths, I sensed the possibility of escape, or at least understanding, but only if I could unravel the final twist, the last secret kept from us all. So here we stand, at the edge of everything you thought you knew, where the lines between watcher and watched, memory and invention, truth and lie blur beyond recognition. The screen flickers, the spiral pulses faintly in the corner of your vision, and you realize, this is not just my story, it's yours too. And the question is no longer who will uncover the hidden truth, but who will survive it. Because the eyes that have always been watching are waiting for your next move. There comes a moment in every unraveling story when the question shifts. No longer what happened, but why. I stood there, at the precipice, the weight of everything pressing down like a tide I could no longer resist. The truth I sought wasn't a mere sequence of events or hidden conspiracies. It was a mirror reflecting the most fragile, terrifying parts of being human, our longing to belong, the desperate need for control, the way we fracture ourselves to survive in a world that doesn't ask if we're ready. I realized then that this force watching us, shaping memories, erasing histories, twisting realities, it wasn't some external monster lurking in shadows. It was the echo of every unspoken pain, every silenced fear, every secret we bury inside to keep the chaos at bay. It was the sum of our collective denial and yearning, the darkness we refuse to face when we close our eyes at night, the spiral symbol, the vanished voices, the shared dreams. They weren't just signs of something alien. They were markers of our human fragility and resilience intertwined. The hardest truth? It might destroy me. To see clearly meant tearing apart the identity I'd built, the memories I trusted, the narrative that held me upright through every nightmare. But it might also save me. The fragile hope that somewhere in the ruins of what I thought was real, a new understanding awaited, a chance to reclaim what was lost and choose a different path forward. I remember sitting in that silent room, heart hammering, the phone cold against my palm, the observer's last message glowing faintly. Choose what you carry. The truth is a burden and a gift. Only you decide. I wanted to confess, to admit that part of me wanted to run back to ignorance, to the comfort of not knowing, to the safety of forgetting. But I also wanted to embrace the terror of awakening, to step into the light no matter how blinding it might be. The choice wasn't just about uncovering a mystery. It was about reclaiming my humanity in the face of something that threatened to dissolve it. The spiral pulsed again in the corner of my vision. Not a threat, but a reminder. We are all caught in its swirl, all struggling to break free or surrender. There is no simple ending here, no final answer. Only the endless turning, the slow peeling away of illusions until all that's left is raw, unfiltered truth. And as I looked into the quiet abyss, I understood this was less an ending than a beginning, a terrifying awakening that would haunt every moment after, forever changing how I saw myself in the world. The screen fades to black, but the spiral lingers, turning softly in the dark. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for stories you were never meant to hear. Until next time, remember, some truths don't want to be found.